Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Tuesday, September 23rd, day 718 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our culture editor, Jessica Steinberg, whom you all know as my partner in crime on the Times of Israel podcast. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining me on this Rosh Hashanah special edition.
Hey there. Always love to be on the other side of the mic with you, Amanda.
Thank you so much. And today we have a pre-recorded episode that we will dive into Israeli life through Jessica's reporting throughout the country. So we're going to go with her on a trip to Kibbutz Be'eri on the border with Gaza and also way up north to hear about a new set of culinary tours. And along the way, we may also have a few whiskey l'chaims. So all of this and more when we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our culture editor, Jessica Steinberg. So, Jess, I just loved how you set the scene of your recent trip to Kibbutz Be'eri, and I'm going to read out the opening of your really amazing piece. Okay. It was 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, and baker Yaki Sagi was pouring honey cake batter into loaf tins at the Lalush bakery in Kibbutz Be'eri. The sense of honey and chai masala, Sagi's secret ingredient, suffused the small space behind the kibbutz kitchen in the community's dining hall complex. This is where it all happens, said Sagi. We pump up the music, we measure and pour and stir and bake, and when we need to, we tell the stories. And of course, Kibbutz Be'eri has many, many stories. Just to remind our listeners that on October 7th, when Hamas attacked southern Israel, 101 civilians and 31 security personnel were killed at Kibbutz Be'eri, and 32 people were taken hostage. The bodies of 6 of the Be'eri hostages killed in captivity still remain in Gaza. So let's go from the sweet to the bitter. And let's first talk about Sagi. Who is he?
Yaki Sagi, right. So Yaki Sagi is 54 years old. He was born in Eilat and went to live at Be'eri when he was 14 as part of a high school program where you could go live on a different kibbutzim around the country. He chose Be'eri. He's been there basically for the last 40 years. With a break of about, 7-8 years in his 20s when he was traveling and studying the culinary arts and becoming a chef and then a pastry chef. He's a very friendly, cheery kind of guy, very energetic, the kind of person who you feel like you know them the first second that you speak to them or even just send WhatsApp messages back and forth, which is, of course, what we did as we first got to know each other. I had been hearing about him for a long time, years before October 7th. And then after October 7th, he and his family had just come back from a trip abroad, and they had gone to visit his in-laws in the north and were not at the kibbutz on October 7th. And then as his family joined the rest of the Be'eri residents at a hotel in the Dead Sea, he realized he's a very ADHD kind of guy. I have no idea if he's actually has that designation, but he is a very energetic person who cannot sit still. And he realized that he really needed to go back to doing something. And so he asked a friend of his, a baker named Uri Sheft, who has a very successful chain of bakeries called Lechamim in Tel Aviv, in the Tel Aviv area, if he could just take a corner of his kitchen. And that is what he did. And he decided to create, at the very beginning, a pastry, a savory pastry, phyllo dough, circular, stuffed with cheeses that are also made at Be'eri. I've also written about that. Spinach grown at a nearby moshav, eggplant at another nearby moshav. And he created this spinach phyllo dough tart that he would then, that companies and businesses would serve for, lunches to their staff, and he would tell the story. And that's how he got back on his feet again. A long answer to your question.
No, it's a great answer. And since you were in Be'eri and you've been there several times reporting, of course, on the hostage situation, which is another of your hats that you wear at the Times of Israel. But I wonder, how have things changed? I mean, going into any kind of bakery it's just the most homely smell you can imagine, right? I mean, I imagine cinnamon and just baked goods, they
Chai masala.
equate home.
Right, right.
Exactly. That is home for me. And so there has to be some kind of dissonance when you're talking about a place that was so devastated, like Kibbutz Be'eri, but there has been already some rebuilding there. And what have you seen among your many trips there? Compare and contrast.
Yeah, sure. The first trips, of course, were it felt much more desolate. You saw the destruction, you saw the burned out homes, you saw sidewalks that had been, presumably shot up by machine gun fire. Now it feels very put back together. I did not see a new neighborhood that is almost done. In fact, Yaki is moving back with his family to one of those new neighborhoods in January or so. But the kibbutz looks good. It looks, it's a very beautiful kibbutz. It has beautiful green lawns and flowering bushes, but it's very empty. Basically, the only people there are those who work there, mostly at the big print house that they have that's right at the entrance of the kibbutz, a big, big building. I was in the dining hall complex, as you mentioned, and the people who were eating lunch at lunchtime were people who work in the print shop for the most part and in some other areas. The kibbutz as a whole, the residents are temporarily living in Kibbutz Chatzerim, which is outside Beersheba, about a 45-minute drive away. People like Yaki and others drive in. They basically commute to work. He's used to, riding a bike for 5 minutes to his bakery, and now he's driving about an hour. And the same for most of the other people. There probably are a handful of people who are living in their homes there because they chose to, or because they take care of the cowshed or other parts of the agricultural crops of the kibbutz that really need someone on hand. But it's quiet. And as he mentioned, and I had also noticed it, there's no kids around. There's no little kids, no babies being, rolled around in those cribs on wheels.
Agalul, it's called, yeah.
Agalul, thank you. I was blanking on the name. Certainly not thinking of it in English. No kids on the lawn, no people walking on the sidewalks. It's just quiet. That was what I felt the most.
Okay, let's go from there and take a l'chaim already and talk about the whiskey endeavor. A whiskey called Single Be'eri was a single malt project led by another Be'eri resident. And if I know very little about baking, I know even less about whiskey. Don't tell my Irish, Scottish ancestors that. And in fact, I would even spell it differently than you spelled it in your piece. I would add an E there, but what do I know? And
you can spell it either way. Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us about this Single Be'eri that is being led by, I think, former Knesset member Chaim Jalin, right? He's part of this project?
Yalin. Yeah. Chaim Yalin is a resident of Be'eri, was an administrator in the local area, became a Chaver Knesset, became a Knesset member. Really, in the days right after October 7th, he emerged as a sort of a face and a spokesperson for the kibbutz and for the area because so many had been killed. And I don't know a lot about the project yet because it's really in its early days. And I found out about it because of a 2-day whiskey event in Tel Aviv called Whiskey Live that is run by the distiller of Milk and Honey, which is Israel's biggest whiskey distillery based in Tel Aviv. And they've done several October 7th projects. One was named for the Nova, for the Desert Rave, and that was a blend. What is a blend? Whiskeys poured together. The Nova blend was a blend of Israeli whiskeys. There's about 9 distilleries. The Single Be'eri was an idea of Chaim Yalin. At Be'eri, they've always grown wheat. Wheat is, the sort of the base crop for whiskey that's then malted. So they regrew their crop of wheat. They took a portion of it. In Israel, the malting process can't be done yet in Israel because it requires these massive barrels. So they sent the wheat to Germany where the wheat was malted, brought it back. Whiskey, of course, has to sit for a long time, 10 years, 12 years, 14 years, 18 years. This whiskey is it's in its very early stages. We had little sips of it. at Whiskey Live at the Tel Aviv event. Everyone was crowding around him. Everyone just wanted to shake Chaim Yalin's hand. People were definitely taking a lot of tastes of different whiskeys, both imported and local, but there was such a feeling of wanting to be together, wanting to just have this moment with Chaim Yalin, who's really become this face of Be'eri, and to do something as simple as having a sip of whiskey and knowing that it's a moment of unity. It's a moment of just drinking whiskey together. And everyone was crowding around him. And what can I say? It felt great. It felt great to just have that kind of moment together.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about this event itself, the Tel Aviv Whiskey Live event. It was the 11th annual. I've never heard of it because, of course, I'm not a drinker and I'm not running in these circles. But set the scene a little bit more. How many people?
Sure. So I had actually done a preview piece about it, which is why I was tempted to go, having not been in a very long time. It's at the Tel Aviv Expo, which is a big convention center. I had interviewed the guy who runs the Israel Whiskey Lovers site. There are 27,000 people in Israel who are, let's say, whiskey fans, okay? And as I said, about 9 Israeli distilleries, and that's only in the last 15 years. I mean, it's very, very new here. Israel is a very small market when it comes to whiskey, but at the same time, this guy, Gil Firth, he's the one who runs the whiskey club. He's actually a firefighter from the north. This is his hobby. He told me that Israel is in the top 10 of whiskey fan clubs in the world. The only one where the spoken language is not English, because of course it's Hebrew. So what's the event? The event is a big hangar, a big convention center space. All of the whiskey companies have set up booths. Some of them are Israeli. There are also some beers that were created mostly in memory of soldiers who were killed since October 7th. There were several beers like that that carry their name. There was a distillery from the south, not from the Negev, not from the Gaza envelope, but from the Arava, from the other side, where they distill dates and make arak and gin and other spirits. As I said, there was Chaim Yalin and the single Be'eri. There were well-known whiskeys like Singleton and Lefroy and Balvenie, and really a host of other Scottish whiskeys that also had booths. Milk and Honey, the biggest Israeli distillery, had a very major booth with all of their different whiskeys available for tasting. And people just walk around with a whiskey glass, getting mostly tastes for free. And it's very convivial. It's a very feel-good kind of space. People definitely take the train. They are not driving to and from this kind of event. And friendly, easygoing, polite. No one's pushing, no one's shoving. Everyone's just kind of happy to be there and to have a night off from everything. That was the overall sense.
Sounds great. Let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our culture editor, Jessica Steinberg. So let's travel up to the north. And nearly 10 months after the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, a new set of culinary tours is aiming to give a shot in the arm to restaurants in Israel's north that are still struggling with the fallout of the war. So I've never been on a culinary tour. You've done several. I don't know if you joined this particular one, but it's through a Tel Aviv-based Asif Culinary Institute of Israel. So what is the goal of this particular tour to the north?
Right. So first I'll talk about Asif for a second. Asif, as you said, is this culinary center in the heart of Tel Aviv on Lindley and Bloom Street. Before October 7th, they have a culinary library. They have exhibits. They would host chefs. They would host chefs with new cookbooks, food writers, really anything culinary oriented. A very fantastic kind of space with its own cafe. The minute October 7th happened, they, like many other restaurants and many other organizations, just jumped into doing whatever they could. In the very beginning, that meant cooking for soldiers, for reservists, cooking for evacuated families from the north and the south that ended up in Tel Aviv. then opening their own kitchens, their own test kitchens to evacuees who were spending months upon months in Tel Aviv and wanted to cook in a kitchen. They really did so many different kinds of events. They did a first set of food tours that I probably wrote about at least a year ago for reservists and their spouses, taking them on food tours in mostly in Tel Aviv, a little bit outside as well, basically giving people a morning off, an afternoon off, something kind of fun to do, sort of express themselves. And then they decided to put together these northern tours called Safona, northward, northern, however you want to translate it. Because after the ceasefire with Hezbollah, really almost a year ago, the North has still really suffered. People only started returning home in the spring and summer. And for restaurants, and not even only restaurants, really like small mom and pop kind of operations, the kind of places that tourists used to flock to, someone's home restaurant or kitchen workshops, a lot of Druze businesses. These places just did not have enough business that was happening. I experienced it myself in June. I went up to the Golan Heights. We visited with a Druze home chef. We visited with cheese purveyors. They're basically a husband and wife had left their business in design and started making cheese and had opened their new boutique cheese store on October 6th. And of course, hadn't had any business in the ensuing year and a half. Anyway, Asif, the Culinary Center, said, let's do tours up north. Let's bring people to the north so that they can go to these places, spend a day, spend some money. And they do individuals on Fridays only. And they also offer transportation from the country center because you're talking about 2 or 3 hours north. And then they're really pushing businesses who often will do a day out for their staff. Yom Kef, a fun day, a bonding experiences. Instead of doing paintball or something else, do a food tour. And these companies can have hundreds, or even thousands of staff members. And so those are done during the week. And they're all over the place. They're in Tiberia, in Tiberias, which the Asif people said to me actually has not had food tours in a long time. That's the main city on the Sea of Galilee, on the Kinneret, but also all the way up to Tzfat, in the Golan Heights, in Majdal Shams, which is the Druze village at the base of the Hermon, really all over the north in order to really push business and push tourists back to these places and to help them as much as possible. So anyone who's interested, the information's in the article.
Jessica, that sounds so interesting. And I'm filing it away for maybe a fun day for our staff, hopefully at some point. But in any case, Jessica, I'm wishing you a Shana Tova, a good year, and many, many, many more podcasts together like this.
Amen. May it be so, Amanda. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.